dark and difficult times lie ahead. Soon we must all face the choice between what is right and what is easy.
Barbara Sharp was enjoying some quiet time visiting her deceased mum's grave. Barbara took her dog along with her for a walk and likely for a bit of company while she was visiting the grave. However, the private time she was hoping to have with her deceased mum was suddenly interrupted by a couple of parasites who abused their position of authority almost as much, if not more so, than the police. For avoidance of doubt, enforcement agents, enforcement officers, whatever you want to call them, generally don't work for the council directly. They are subcontractors from various companies that tender to the local government, and because of this, generally the employees of said companies have targets to hit in order to keep their tender with the local government. And this means, unfortunately, that following the rules, following the regulations, and following certain codes of ethics often go out the window in the hope that they can go back to the office at the end of the day and get a nice big pat on the back for fining the most people.
Fucking took a bank card and everything off her.
No, she's got
Sharp is mum.
No, I've got it somewhere.
You've got it.
Fucking fuming.
I have. Oh,
You don't come to the cemetery for this shit. Scumbag.
lost so many people. He's breaking me out. No, I have to pay £100.
Don't pay nothing. You don't pay nothing. You're Paul's mum, aren't you?
Now, I don't know a great deal about enforcement officers, but what I do know is that most of them are employed by an outside company, i.e. they're not employed directly by the council. And what this does is it gives these enforcement officers quite a bit of movement, shall we say, to skirt around legislation, law, rules, recommendations, anything like that. Most of the companies that councils will employ to act as enforcement agents will have various departments, meaning that if somebody is told they can't work on a particular department, i.e. the council enforcement agents, they'll just get moved to another division to continue abusing any of the perceived authority that they may have. I had to do a little bit of digging for this, and what I found is on the .gov.uk website, there are things called a public space protection order. Some areas in England and Wales are covered by public spaces protection orders, or PSPOs. In public areas with PSPOs, you may have to keep your dog on a lead. Put your dog on a lead if told by a police officer, police community support officer, or someone from the council. Stop your dog going to certain places like farmland or parts of a park. Limit the number of dogs you have with you. Clear up after your dog. Carry a poop scoop and disposable bags. And the penalties. If you ignore a PSPO, you can be fined. £100 on the spot, called a fixed penalty notice, or FPN, and up to £1,000 if it goes to court. Now, this lady was fined £100 on the spot. I would therefore hazard a guess that there is a PSPO in force for this particular cemetery. But this goes on to say that local councils must let the public know where the PSPOs are in place. For example, if dogs are not allowed in a park, there must be signs saying so, and if the council plans to put a new PSPO in place, it must put up a notice and publish it on its website. This notice must tell you where the new PSPO will apply, if there's a map, and where you can see it. I did, however, manage to find on North Lincolnshire Council's website 2 listings for PSPO. One is about dog fouling, and this one is about the actual public space protection order and issues itself. Upon clicking and visiting the page, all this tells you is that the PSPO is one of the tools the council employs to control the minority of irresponsible dog owners. There are 3 separate parts to the order relating to dog control, and each part can be viewed below. Number 1, dog feces left by any dog should be removed immediately by the person in charge of or responsible for the dog. Dogs are excluded from enclosed children's play areas and other designated sites such as schools. A single person cannot have more than 4 dogs in their sole charge. Now that's the three separate parts of the PSPO order relating to dog control. But yet this lady was accused of having the dog off the lead, and as I said earlier, there seems to be no information about dogs being off the lead unless they're a dangerous dog or they are causing other people alarm or distress. Even underneath in these drop downs, this is about fouling of land by dogs. Dogs are excluded from certain designated land, which states a person in charge of a dog shall be guilty of an offence if at any time they take the dog onto or permits the dog to enter or remain on any land to which the order applies, unless they have a reasonable excuse for doing so, or the owner, occupier or other person of authority having control of the land has consented to his doing so. Nothing in the PSPO applies to a person who is registered blind, is deaf, has a disability, etc. For the purpose of the PSPO, a person who habitually has a dog in his possession shall be taken to be in charge of the dog at any time, unless at that time some other person is in charge of the dog. And the penalty for a person who takes a dog or dogs onto land where dogs are excluded may be offered on the spot £80 FPN, or a summary conviction to a fine not exceeding £1,000. Now, I believe from the incident itself, which I will play in full in just a few seconds, there is nothing that states that dogs are not allowed. But again, here there is nothing about dogs being kept on a lead. We have number of dogs single person may walk. What should I do if I come across a dangerous dog? Who's responsible for animal welfare? What can we do about barking dogs? How can I pay a fixed penalty fine? So there is nothing there at all about dogs being off the lead. And yet this lady was fined £100 for her dog apparently being off its lead. Now I believe from the video that there was a sign on the gate. I've tried to contact this lady and so far failed, but what I wanted to ask her was to send me a picture of said sign and also to do a subject access request to see if there was any body cam footage from these enforcement officers of the incident that took place, as they suggest that she had her dog off the lead, but she clearly absolutely denies that fact. Now I went on to look up the local government association at local.gov.uk, and there is a guidance for councils on public space protection orders. I went through this public spaces protection order guidance for councils and could find nothing in there about dogs being off their lead. There was information about how dogs may not be allowed to be walked somewhere, but consideration has to be taken into account for the dog's welfare, i.e. for exercise, etc. There's also something in here about assistance dogs, but nothing about dogs being off their lead or the process that should be followed if somebody is seen to have their dog off the lead. The cemetery itself, cemetery regulations for Scartho Road and Cleethorpes cemeteries, states that dogs must be kept under control and on a short lead at all times. Dog keepers must remove any feces. Now again, the lady refutes the fact that the dog was off the lead. Even the cameraman who was videoing refutes the fact that the dog was off the lead. The lady suggests that as she bent down to put some flowers or tidy up the grave top itself, she put the lead on the floor and stood on it to stop the dog from running around. But this is disputed by the enforcement officers and is often a tactic that is used because they feel, and in most cases quite rightly so, that they will be backed up over the member of the public. So as I failed to get in contact with this lady, what I've decided to do instead was make a Freedom of Information request to North East Lincolnshire Council, the council that cover Scartho Road Cemetery. I've decided to ask them if they can provide me with the latest copy and the previous copy of the Public Spaces Protection Order that covers the Scartho Road Cemetery. In particular, the area covered by restrictions under the PSPO, including Scartho Road Cemetery and immediate surrounding areas. The actual limitations placed on the area covered by the PSPO, information on where public may find information relevant to the PSPO to ensure that they know about the PSPO, and what the council do to inform the locals of such an order. I would also like to know whether the local council employ directly the enforcement officers as employees of the council, or whether the council utilises the service of a subcontractor company to enforce the PSPO, which I'm now going to preview and now send and publish. So now that has been sent on What Do They Know to North East Lincolnshire Council, to which I hope to receive a response very soon. And when I do, I will update with a new video. But going back to this incident itself, let's see what else occurs.
Don't take nothing off him. Don't take nothing.
Nothing wrong. Nothing wrong.
Come in the cemetery where people are seeing their fucking loved ones. Fining people. What? For what? Because she's got a dog with her. You having a laugh? How do you sleep at night? Hide your face, because you're going all over the internet.
Nothing wrong.
If you want to query, you can phone up that number. Speak to them on
I
option
got my
7.
card back.
I gave you your card back straight away, madam.
Scumbag.
Yeah, it makes me an old-age pensioner.
Scumbag.
Put up with this. Where's the card?
You had it straight back off me, madam.
All-day pensioner. Come to the graveyard and you come here sneaking up and fining her for walking a dog.
Not sneaking up.
Yes, you was. I just watched you. Just watched you.
Watch this walking across.
Have some respect.
I need my card. Where's
You've
it?
got your card, you've got it back.
How many people can you find on the street round town? All the druggies sat round town here, targeting old people, visiting loved ones at graves. How do you sleep at night? Seeing these cunts taking a piss, fining her for having a dog. He's fining her for having a dog in the cemetery. Fucking took a bank card and everything off her.
No, she's got
Sharp is man.
No, I've got it somewhere.
You've got it in there.
Fucking fuming.
Anyhow. Oh.
You don't come to the cemetery for this shit. Scumbag.
Lost so many people. He's breaking me heart. Now I have to pay £100.
Don't pay nothing. You don't pay nothing.
As I said,
You're
madam,
Paul's mum, aren't you?
You just
Yeah.
Yeah.
contact that.
Tell Paul. I'm going to ring Paul up in a minute.
Okay.
I've got it
You've
now.
got your card, yeah.
Oh,
Alright, that's for you, madam. Next time, keep the dog with you on the
I'm
lead.
not going to come out anymore.
Okay, madam, thank you for your time.
yeah, they are. Oh, sneaky little bastards. £100 fine. Fucking set the bastard on him. Sick man. Sick bastard. Where's the sign of dogs?
You can have dogs in here.
Yeah?
Keep them under control on the lead at all times.
That dog's been under control all the time. It's been me and Harry all last hour. Last hour. I've not seen that dog run off once, mate. Don't chat shit.
Well, I'm sorry, sir.
What's your name?
We saw it.
You saw it?
seen
What,
me,
sat in a
yeah.
car in a cemetery? How bad is that?
Ross, I'm sorry.
Hey, how bad is that? You have to come to a cemetery to catch people. How do you sleep at night?
It's part of the job, sir.
What cemetery?
We have a job to
Cemetery.
deal with.
You have a job to deal with. You call this a job? Hey,
And then
Hey.
signing on the dogs.
is it? Is it really? Because I don't think it is. I'd rather sign on a doll than sit in a cemetery finding little old fucking women for walking dogs, coming to see loved ones. He fucking needs knocking
You
out.
can't bring dogs on here. You can bring on dogs.
He's saying it's not under control. That dog hasn't run off once.
Well, I've always let my dog off in here. I've never ever once been told not to.
But it does
Where's
say
it saying?
signs are on all the inches.
Fucking in bit. You were fucking joking, you big fat cunt.
You can bring dogs on here, but you have to keep them on the lead and in your hand.
Where's it state that then?
I know, no signs anywhere. Bullshit.
Absolute bullshit. He's getting pakanda in here. You're getting paid for
Get paid every fucking ticket you give out. mate.
You're getting fuck off.
Fucking cunt.
Name and shame you on Facebook.
He's on fucking YouTube at a minute.
Stop.
Fucking out of order.
Just opinion
Well, fine, look. Little dog, find her. She come here to visit her brother's grave. And fucking joke.
So what if a dog like has a little fiddle or whatever? It's not going to
I
wear
know.
them, is it?
Not being funny, but why didn't they go get them two over there that have their dog over there?
They were still on the same.
It's meant to be for dog walkers, not for people that are visiting the grave with the dogs. You know, people that let them loose while they're running around. That's what it's meant to be. The law.
So, what should we do when faced with one of these parasites? Where do we stand? What are the legal implications or lawful implications of dealing with one of these cretins? Well, first of all, I'm going to hand you over to one of the greatest YouTube channels on such matters, Grindage. And let's just very quickly hear what he has to say in a previous video that he made.
So what happens if you refuse to give your name and address and walk away? Will you end up doing hard time for it? Well, firstly, these litter officers, CEOs, support officers, of whatever myriad of names they choose to give themselves, none of them have any powers to put their hands upon you to stop you from leaving. All they're able to do is call the police.
Well, I refuse to give my details anyway about this. So, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not being detained. You're not a police officer.
That's right.
So, I don't... You have to call the police, that's fine.
Now, I'm not going to even comment about how keen the police are likely to be when one ticketing authority contacts another, but I've already gone down this route when I made a Freedom of Information request to every police force in England and Wales, asking them how many people have been prosecuted for failing to provide details to a police community support officer. Most of them couldn't come up with a figure. Some of them didn't even know the offence existed. And one of them even asked me to provide them with a Home Office offence code so that they could look it up. No such offence code existed. In the end, I contacted the CPS, who provided me with the answer. In a 12-month period, only 3 people had been prosecuted for the offence of failing to provide their details to a plastic policeman.
So what does this actually mean for you? If you're approached by somebody to tell you to put your dog on the lead or to pick up piece of litter that you've dropped. Well, as Grindage just said, only 3 people in 12 months were convicted of failing to give their details to a PCSO. So if there's no real offence code for failing to give your details to a PCSO, then there is none for giving your details to an enforcement officer. They see somebody who's vulnerable and they pounce on them and extort £100 or £80 to £100 from them. The problem is that people just don't understand their rights when it comes to these parasites. They have a uniform, they have a badge, and most people will see that and just assume authority, when in reality they're not. They're about as powerful as the TV licence people that come knocking on your door, who have no powers to gain entry or to force you to do anything that you don't want to do. The thing is, the problem increases for you the more you hang around. If you fail to give your details and you hang around where you are, they can call the police to come and speak to you, and obviously when a fully fledged police officer asks for your details, they can come up with a myriad of different legislations or made up scenarios that will require you to give them your details. They will then pass those details on to the enforcement agent. Personally, I see that as data protection breach if you're giving your details to a police officer and then they pass your details on to somebody else. However, if you're faced with a situation like this, the best thing to do is to leave the vicinity as quickly as you can. And that doesn't mean walking away, unfortunately, because these people are there to make money off of you. They will follow you. They'll call the police, they'll follow you until the police arrive, and then they'll, do their little dance and get your details from you. What you need to do is you need to jump on the nearest bus, or you need to call a taxi, or you need to get in your car and disappear. Fortunately, if you refuse to pay the fine and there is no evidence on their part, there is a likelihood that you will get away with it. What I mean by get away with it is I'm not suggesting that you should purposely break any rules. What I'm saying is these people don't generally care about rules themselves. So if their body cam isn't on, if they have no proof of you letting your dog off the lead, letting your dog foul on the pavement, dropping a piece of litter, whatever it might be, if there is no evidence of that happening and it goes to court, there is a likelihood that charges will be dropped against you because of the lack of evidence. There is still a chance that you will still get prosecuted for it, but the chance of that happening decreases if there is no visible evidence from the enforcement officers. It's always a good idea to film yourself. Any interaction with anybody that is in a position of authority, you should, before you even start talking to them, get your mobile phone out and start recording so that you have got every piece of footage for the entire incident. Problem is, if you start talking to them before you get your phone out, then there's, that's part of the evidence that's missing, which could potentially help your case. So I would suggest that anybody approaches you, before you even speak to them, take your phone out and start filming so that you have everything that you said during that entire interaction recorded. On the .gov.uk website, there is guidance for enforcement officers issuing fixed penalty notices, how and when you can issue fixed penalty notices, FPNs, if you've been authorised by a district or parish council or other authority. And it says when to issue fixed penalty notices. Only issue an FPN when all of the following apply. An offence has been committed, an FPN is a proportionate response, there's evidence to support prosecution if the offender doesn't pay the fixed penalty, the offender understands why the fixed penalty is being issued, and you believe that the name and address offered by the offender are correct. In most cases, it's not a proportionate response. In some cases, there is no evidence to support prosecution. And this is what you need to find out before you admit or before you take a ticket from them or before you decide to leave the area altogether. And then we've got when not to issue a fixed penalty notice. Do not issue an FPN if any of the following apply. There is no criminal liability. Enforcement action is inappropriate or would be disproportionate for the offence. Prosecution is more suitable, or littering is done accidentally. Now, yes, some of this is discussing or talking about the litter police, but they are all enforcement officers. And the title of this section on the government website is enforcement officers. And no matter what they're enforcing, they are still enforcement officers and have to follow guidelines. We've got no criminal liability, so don't issue an FPN in the following cases. The person in question is exempt. For example, a blind person whose dog has fouled in an area where a dog control order applies, or if the offender is a child under the age of 10. Enforcement action is inappropriate or disproportionate, which in most cases it certainly is. And it says don't issue an FPN in the following cases. It is not in a public interest to do so, the offender is vulnerable, or the offence is trivial. Now in this case of Barbara Sharp, she's a vulnerable woman. She is a pensioner. Okay, the guy doesn't know that she has cancer until she mentions it, and she was there visiting her deceased mum. All of those make her a vulnerable person. And was the offence trivial? I think it probably was. There was no indication, there was no mention that the dog was running amok and digging up people's graves and, weeing up, gravestones. There was none of that in this interaction at all. So it was clearly inappropriate and disproportionate. And it moves on to don't issue an FPN if the offence is major, the offence is committed by a persistent offender, or the offender is violent or aggressive. And it even moves on to accidental littering. How many times have you put your hand in your pocket, pulled it out, pulled a tissue out, pulled a bag out, and an old receipt maybe floated off and landed on the floor without you knowing about it? I've seen cases where enforcement officers have pounced on people for that, but these 3 points on the official government website says do not issue FPNs for accidental littering. Only issue FPNs where the evidence of intent to drop litter, and give offenders a chance to pick up litter before you issue an FPN. Warn them that you will issue an FPN if you don't. I'm going to take a stab in the dark here and say that this is a similar method that should be used for enforcement officers regardless to what they're trying to enforce. So if somebody is in a park and the dog is off the lead, for example, and it shouldn't be, then surely the correct method of approaching that situation would be to say, I'm sorry, the dogs aren't allowed off their lead. Can you please put your dog on the lead? If they fail to do so, or if the enforcement officer walks off and comes back and the dog's off the lead again, then fine. Do you know what I mean? They've been asked, they haven't complied, then is the chance to speak to them. But everybody should have the chance in situations like this to be able to rectify any problem that may be deemed to be happening at that time. But unfortunately, it doesn't. Enforcement officers are muggers. They are as bad as street muggers. They will jump on anybody who they feel is vulnerable or who doesn't know their rights. and they will use intimidation tactics. For example, I'm calling the police. You have to do this. You have to do that. I must caution you that anything you say. When somebody starts throwing out words like I must caution you, most people will immediately assume that they have some authority, but they really don't. I wish I could have got hold of Barbara Sharp and asked her to request the body-worn footage if there was any, and also to send me any photos of signs from around the cemetery that suggested that there was a PSPO in order. If anybody watching this knows Barbara Sharp who was involved in this incident, please let me know, or please let her know about this video and that I would like to speak to her. Please share this video so that other people can see how despicable these vultures are. You saw how upset Barbara Sharp was, you know, visibly shaken, crying. Thank God that there was another gentleman there who ultimately realised that he knew her, but recording the incident so that we can all see exactly what kind of filthy animals the enforcement officers really are. I'm going to leave the video there. I've definitely gone on enough this time. I'm going to leave links to the article in the Mirror. I'm going to leave links to the government webpage that talks about fixed penalty notices, so you can brush up your knowledge on that there. I'm also going to leave a link to the full Grindage video in the description below as well. If you haven't subscribed to mine, please hit that like button. I would appreciate that incredibly. Again, please share. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. As you know, I love to interact with you. And by liking, sharing, subscribing and commenting, it helps to get my videos promoted, as most of them are demonetized or have very limited ads on them. So thank you once again for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day, and until next time,
good night all.